It is Wednesday morning, so that means Garland, Nixon, and Scott Ritter. Plenty to talk about. We got the meeting in Moscow and some things going on the battlefield in Ukraine. Let's talk. All right, Garland and Scott, plenty to talk about today. Just let everybody know this is my Wednesday morning subscriber only, mostly show for Rockfin. As you all know, I advocate that everyone on YouTube should have some other platform that they're on in case YouTube tosses us all off. Mine is Rockfin, and Rockfin's great. And what Rockfin does, it doesn't have any advertisements, so you can watch it all the time with no advertisements. But they do allow subscribers. That's how they keep going. So if you can afford to be a subscriber, it's $14.99 a month. And if you can't afford, and then if you sign up for a year, they do. They knock a couple months off. It comes down to like $12 a month or so. But everything, all of my stuff, with the exception of my one Wednesday morning show, which is subscriber only, all the rest of my stuff everybody can see. So if you can't afford the $12.99, I mean the $14.99 a month or whatever it comes, $12 a month, whatever it comes out to, you can be a member. You'll see all of my stuff with the exception of my Wednesday morning show. And by the way, this evening, Scott and Andre Martianov are going to be on at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be a great show. All right, Scott, let's start here. We got things to talk about. We got depleted uranium rounds. We got and provocations. We got a Xi Putin meeting. Let's start off with the Putin Xi meeting. I'll get your thoughts on it. I have some thoughts, some interesting thoughts. But let's go.
Well, what's interesting is that we in the West are trying to interpret what's going on. We are trying. We have attempted to impose beforehand our own expectations. But the fact of the matter is, this is a relationship between Putin and Xi that doesn't care what we think and doesn't care what the West thinks, doesn't care about any of that. Literally impervious to it. I think there was a lot of focus. I was guilty of this, of the peace, a peace plan, the potential peace plan, focusing in on that. And yet when they left, there's no talk about it. I mean, Zelensky's apparently still waiting by the phone for Xi's call. I don't know if he'll be waiting forever, or is there going to be a peace plan? We don't know. Clearly, it wasn't a priority for these two, and that's important to point out, because part of my assessment going in is that a peace plan would be important for China. That China needed to be seen as trying to pursue peace in order to square their Westphalian principles with Russia's incursion in Ukraine. But based upon the dialogue between Putin and Xi, that's done. That's water under the bridge. China is 100% behind Russia's efforts in Ukraine. No questions asked. You got it, boss. Run with it. There's no squaring that needs to take place. Therefore, there's no artificial requirement for the Chinese to seek to impose a peace agreement on this process. So will there be a Chinese-led peace effort? Maybe. We don't know. But what's clear is it wasn't the driving factor in this meeting. So we in the West got it all wrong. Apparently, Russian-Chinese relations are A-OK. Then the other thing, people are like, yeah, but man, there wasn't any earth-shattering Siberian gas pipeline deal. And if you don't have that, that means the Chinese are holding back. And I'm like, really? Everything I've read indicates that this is still in the negotiating phase, that they're talking about finalizing a deal later on down the road this summer, and that there's no why would you announce something that's still being talked about? I mean, for instance, even Nord Stream 2, before people could talk about finalizing the project, surveys had to be done, environmental studies had to be done, impact statements had to be done. There's a whole lot of work that has to be done before you come out and say, "Yep, we're 100% committed to this." What the Chinese said is, "Yeah, this is what we want. We're headed in that direction. We look forward to working with you on it." And to me, that's like normal. But in the West, we're so desperate to find anything that we can spin to say Chinese and the Russians aren't that close. Hey, newsflash, China and Russia are pretty darn close, guys. And it's the last thing we in the West ever wanted or expected. Remember Joe Biden's effort in June of 2021 to drive a wedge between Putin and Xi by, without any prompting, saying, "Yeah, I told Putin, you don't want to get in bed with them Chinese. They're trying to take you over. You need to be with us. Well, now, Joe, when was the last time you made pancakes with Xi Jinping on his birthday? Oh, never. So you're not that close. You may think you are, but that's probably because you took $1 million or more in hush money that we don't want to talk about. Who knows? But I just know that Putin isn't taking money on the side from China, and Putin and Xi have a really close relationship that is based upon mutual trust, mutual admiration. And according to the Chinese and the Russians, it's better than any alliance you could have because there are no limits. There are no expectations. There are no artificialities. It is what it is.
Yeah, what I saw was two things. Number one, I saw two businessmen, right? I saw two people wherein they looked at this and, the U.S., are they going to send them, more weapons? I guess the Chinese going to send them more shovels, according to, the U.S. evaluation. Are they going to send them more weapons, more this, more that? The most important thing that the Chinese could do, as I see it, for Russia is to provide an economic backstop due to sanctions. And what I saw was a further integration economically, so that would happen, and Russia would be solid economically. They wouldn't have to worry about that, and that China would be more solid regarding their energy supply. That basically they're saying, look, that energy that used to go to Europe, it's going to cost you money because you can't sell it to them. But we need energy, and you're close. We'll take the cheap energy, and that was the main thing, that it was just further integration. Oh, the other thing that I saw were statements made about multipolarity. Basically, the statement made it's something that I have said for a while, that these two nations understand that they are critical in leading the world into safely transitioning the world into a multipolar situation. And they made statements like that. That's the other thing that I got, that they're like, we're taking the world into safely. We're going to guide the world into multipolarity, and we got to be economically sound to do it. That's what we're working on. I did see some things that led me to believe that there's going to be further military integration. They didn't come out and say it, but when you say we're tighter than tight, our alliance is bigger, greater than any alliance could ever be, you don't kind of have to say it, because everybody can look at it and say, if the Russians, the Chinese can never allow the Russians to fall. Scott.
Well, Russia will never fall. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like me looking up at Mount Everest and saying, we better put some scaffolding on the foundation because Mount Everest, we can't have Mount Everest falling. It ain't going to fall. It's there. Nothing you're putting down is going to have any impact on it. Russia isn't going to fall. Now, life could be complicated for Russia if China wasn't there to help. There's no doubt about that. The Chinese-Russian relationship is helping Russia out. But again, the West needs to understand, no nuclear armed power is going to allow itself to be defeated by peer level opponents. That just isn't going to happen. The Soviet Union wasn't defeated by the West. The Soviet Union collapsed on its own volition. Now, could Russia collapse on its own volition? Doubtful.
Right.
Could Russia collapse if the West is putting pressure on it, creating a collapse? Maybe. But what would Russia do by that pressure? Define it as an existential threat and put people on notice that cease and desist or you will all die. We're not going down. We are the Russian Federation. We have nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons exist to guarantee that we continue to survive. So any one of these idiots out there saying we're promoting regime change, what you're really saying is we want to die, because that's what's going to happen. You're not going to get regime change. If the West is seen as fomenting something like this, then the West becomes the enemy. So it's ridiculous thinking. But China understands the big picture here. They understand that the collective West is targeting Russia, and the collective West is targeting China. Now, the collective West is telling China, we're not really targeting you, but we are. Sanctions, the same threat of sanctions that are being imposed in a massive scale on Russia are being levied on China every single day. And the same thing with weaponry. When the United States Marine Corps Commandant comes in and says, we have been tasked by the National Command Authority to be prepared to carry out amphibious operations against the Chinese target. And I'm the Chinese going, really? Why would you want to task them to do that? Oh, you guys are upset with South China Sea, so you want to go to war in the South China Sea with us, and your Marine Corps is going through a radical transformation for the sole purpose of confronting us in the South China Sea. Okay, so clearly China knows what America's up to. The Marine Corps says we need long-range strike missiles so we can go around on islands and fire them at Chinese installations. That ain't peace, guys. That's called war. The United States Navy talks about sailing to Taiwan. The U.S. Air Force talks about interdicting Chinese logistics in case of a conflict with Taiwan. 2 + 2 = 4, no matter how you cut it. And the Chinese are saying, you guys are getting ready for war with us. You're threatening sanctions on us. So therefore, when you tell us maybe we shouldn't be supporting Russia, we're thinking maybe we should be supporting Russia. Maybe we're thinking that the people that are on our side speak Russian, not English, not French. What is, I just sometimes laugh at the Australians and how utterly stupid they are. And if there's any Australian on here listening to me, I'm sorry, you're stupid. Your number one trade partner is China, right? Yeah, but you don't have to nod your head. We know what the answer is, right? Australia, it's China. You can't live without China, right? We know the answer. You don't have to answer. These are all rhetorical questions. I'll get to the point. So you're going to irritate the Chinese by buying 4 nuclear submarines from the United States. For what purpose? To secure your trade routes with China. Secure them from who? What, the Chinese are going to cut off the trade routes between you and China? It's stupid. And 4? You really think 4 submarines is going to change the balance of power? So you're willing to sacrifice everything you claim to stand for to be seen as the compliant poodle of the United States in an AUKUS relationship where there is no the United Kingdom. Really, what do they bring to bear? Let me remind people, the whole British Army will fit inside a soccer stadium with about 30,000 unsold seats. That's it. So can us. What? The British are going to sell their vaunted fleet? They don't have a vaunted fleet. They have maybe a ship or 2. That's it. So it's the United States, and now they want Australia to bankrupt everything they stand for, principal and fiscal issues, to get 4, count them, 4 U.S. nuclear submarines to do what? Look, the Chinese are taking a look at this and saying everything about the U.S. relationship in the Pacific is geared towards a military confrontation with China. Everything about it. And the United States, in order to keep the system the way it is threatening us with crippling sanctions. We're not going to sit here and just take it. We're not stupid. Russia's the people that we're going to deal with, and they're building a relationship. And remember, this, you called it a business meeting. If you go back to the 4 February statement that they of 2022, right before the Beijing Olympics, what did they talk about? Creating a trans-Eurasian economic union. Now, I know Joe Biden, circa 1997, said, that ain't ever going to happen. The Russians said, if you don't support us, we'll go to China. Well, how was your senior year? I mean, that's a stupid Joe Bidenism. Well, it's pretty damn good, Joe. Senior year was great because we went on a great vacation and we got a good job and we have this great business partner. It's called China. Oh yeah, and that other nation you said you might want to turn to Iran. Ha ha ha. We did that too. So we got this Russia, China, Iranian thing going. India's going to join. Saudi Arabia's going to join. Everybody's going to join. It's looking pretty good, Joe. Senior year was awesome. My goodness, everybody should want a senior year like that, at a senior moment like we're getting from the current president. But the point is, it is a business relationship. I know you point to the military thing, but China is a sovereign state. They don't need Russian military help. There's some people saying that. I saw some talk about China is seeking the Russian nuclear umbrella. China doesn't need the Russian nuclear umbrella. Their relationship with nuclear weapons is different than the Russian-U.S. relationship. They have 350 and counting. They're going to grow. It's going to expand because the United States is grossly irresponsible. But China right now has sufficient nuclear weapons to take out the United States. That's all they need. They just need to tell the United States, 35 of your cities will disappear, and we deem that to be sufficient to be deterrence against you. And it is. And if the United States wants to expand stupidity, then China will go, okay, we'll turn it into 70 cities. If you want 70 to go, we could do that too. They don't need Russia's nuclear umbrella. So, this notion that China is selling, the biggest concern I have of the Russian-Chinese relationship that I have is that Russia, relatively speaking, is economically inferior to China's massive economy. And there's some concerns on the part of Russia about being too rapidly absorbed into the Chinese economic orbit, that Russia, in order to retain its sovereign status, is going to have to control that aspect of the pace of economic growth so as not to be totally subsumed by China. And I think the Chinese respect that. I think the Chinese understand that. So it's not a a deal breaker. It's something both parties look. If you and I were businessmen and we want to try and create a joint partnership, but I bring X to the table, but my business side is small. The right thing is, if we want to be partners, is for you to assist me in building my business, so that when I come to the table from a business perspective, it's not you taking 90% of the calls and me taking 10%. And before I take the 10%, I have to get your permission. It should be you and I roughly around 50%. That's how it works, or 60-40, depending on things like that. But and I think that might be people are always looking and seeing signs of hesitancy, saying there's problems on the home front between Russia and China. I don't think there are problems. I think it's a sign of a healthy, growing relationship.
Before we jump over before we get into Bakhmut and Avdiivka and all of those kind of things, I do want to ask you about the issue. We've got the drone. We've got two things going on with provocations. Three, really. Some senators are saying we should send the Ukrainians, what do you call it? Cluster bombs, right? Which they don't got a lot of planes left anyway to drop them. But the drones, the U.S. is saying we got to send more drones, and the Russian says if you send more drones, that's going to be problematic. And last but not least, the U.K. of all provocatory mice, the mouse that roared, are saying we're going to send depleted uranium tipped anti-armor missiles, and the Russians are saying you better not do that or that's going to be a problem. Anyway, your thoughts on the provocation front?
Well, let's start with the drones. I said when the MQ-9 Reaper was flying, I looked at the pod underneath it and I said that's a signals intelligence pod collecting intelligence about the Crimea Peninsula. They'll be sent to the Ukrainians to facilitate attack. What happened last night? Underwater drone attack by Ukraine against the Russian base at Sevastopol. It was defeated. But my point is, those attacks don't happen out of the blue. They happen based upon intelligence information, current intelligence information. So it wasn't just the MQ-9 Reaper, but we put up I think it was RQ-4 Global Hawk that was out there collecting the same amount of intelligence. I mean, the United States needs to be careful here, because if I'm the Russians, even if I don't have direct access to the intelligence that you collected and proof it, cause-effect relationships are quite clear. and I will reverse engineer the Ukrainian attack. I will find out, how they did what they did. Was there jamming involved? Did they seek deception operations? And if doing that, as I reverse engineer it, I'm finding nodes that connect to collection platforms, meaning that the Ukrainians had intelligence about this. How did they get it? Through the drone. Man, your drone's going down, America. Understand that. You have become a direct participant in the conflict. It's no longer a cute little game. This is stupidity of the highest order. And it's a provocation. And the United States needs to be careful. Hey, what, you want to provide cluster munitions? Why? Because some senator saw a video where it went pop. Oh my God, look at all the people that could have died. Hey, Senator, it's war. All you're going to do is kill some more Russians, but you're not going to win the war, because the Russians have things that go poop, poop, too, and they got more of them, and they're killing a whole bunch of Ukrainians. I know we're going to get into that discussion in a moment. But senators are stupid. Literally, senators are some of the dumbest people on the planet. I've worked with them before. None of them are experts in anything. Even the ones that had military expertise, they become so far removed from it, so enamored of, of their voices and of what they think they know. I wouldn't listen to a U.S. senator ever again on anything. Just hit the delete button and try and find somebody who knows something, because they don't add substance to any discussion, especially when it comes to weaponry, etc. Depleted uranium. Look, the British, they've decided recently to double the number of tanks. They were going to give 14 Challenger 2 tanks. Now they're going to give 28 Challenger 2 tanks. The Challenger 2 uses two kinds of anti-armor ammunition. One is called, I think, HESH, high explosive shaped head. Basically, it's a shape charge, so you hit the armor and it burns this nice little core in there and it penetrates and all that stuff. The other one is depleted uranium penetrator. Basically, it's a depleted uranium, very dense metal. It makes this rod, and you pack it in with the sabot charges, and you fire a sabot's release, and it goes in. And the length of the rod is such that it can penetrate, modern armor to a certain degree. So it's considered to be a very effective tank killer. And so they're going to provide, X number of rounds per tank, whatever the basic combat load is, plus something to sustain combat for a period of time. It's 28 tanks, 50 to 200. Maybe they're giving them 1,000 rounds. I don't know. I don't know. The Russians are concerned. Now, what is the toxicity of depleted uranium? That's one of the big questions. Let's talk about Kosovo for a moment. NATO fired 30,000 depleted uranium rounds in total in Kosovo. NATO initially said it wasn't not a big deal. Don't worry about it. There's no impact on it. The IAEA went in, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and did a study, a survey, and they came back and made pretty much the same thing. But from an environmental standpoint, don't worry about it, negligible risk, da-da-da. However, medical doctors went in and took a look at leukemia rates. And what they said is there's a direct correlation, significant direct correlation, between an increase in leukemia and exposure to depleted uranium. Okay, so right off the bat, we got, and the U.S. Army has come straight out, U.S. Air Force, they talk about handling this. They say, don't get it in you. Because if you get it in you, you can get things like leukemia. So we know, everybody, even the medical staff saying, well, while it indicates, we can't say definitively that this is the case because there's money involved. That suddenly creates, issues about remediation and how do you deal with this? Who's responsible for the cleanup? If it's definitely poisoning people, who pays for that and who cleans it up? And that nobody wants to come in and say, well, NATO, United States, you got to pay that price tag. So we know from the Kosovo incident that it's probable that depleted uranium exposure has led to an increase in leukemia amongst the civilian population of Kosovo and other areas, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, any place that DU rounds were used. Iraq, where the United States went in, and I mean the amount of tonnage of depleted uranium that we poured into Iraq, what we did in Fallujah and elsewhere, we definitely see a dramatic increase in cancer, and child deformities. Kids are being born dead. Kids are being formed horribly disfigured. But the problem is, who controlled Iraq in during the period of time that depleted uranium was being used? America. So who didn't want to do that kind of study? America. And so, and we've continued to put pressure on the Iraqi government to prevent the kind of absolute, definitive medical study. So even though medical doctors are coming out saying, guys, this is sick what's happening here. Look at the photo. I mean, don't look at it, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
Don't look at it, because it's not worth looking at, but it's horrible. The consequences of this, and where did it come from? You can't say that there is no correlation between the absolute use of depleted uranium in massive quantities by the United States and what's happening. But they can't, again, nobody has the courage to put pen to paper and say, this is actually, a direct thing, because no government, because then you assume responsibility. If the United States did the right thing and said, yep, that's on us, well, suddenly we own. Remember, you break it, you own it. Suddenly we own that. We have to go in and clean it up. We're not going to do that. And then we have to pay the price for all the dead babies and sick babies and cancer people. We're not going to do that. And more importantly, that changes our whole approach. I mean, I've said this before, got me in trouble a couple of times. People say, well, what do you think about depleted uranium? I said, well, it depends when you ask me the question, to be honest. Because if you ask me the question while a T-72 tank or T-80 tank is bearing down on me, I love depleted uranium, best friend. Because depleted uranium allows me to reach out and touch that tank at a long distance, terminate it. If it comes in close, I can bring in A-10s with 30 millimeter DU rounds, pop, 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 pop through it. I can bring out 25 millimeter Bushmasters on my M2s or my LAV-25s, pop, 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 and I'm killing tanks left and right. I love depleted uranium. Now, ask me after the war, especially if I was in an M1 Abrams with a friendly fire incident where my depleted uranium armor got hit by a depleted uranium penetrator from another M1 Abrams, creating a cloud of radioactive dust that I've now inhaled into my body. And I've gone home and I've made love to my wife, and she's given birth to deformed children. And not only have I infected my wife, but I've infected my kids and I'm dying myself. I suddenly am not a fan of depleted uranium. I'm suddenly saying, wow, that's a horrific cost, a price I paid. And then if you ask me if I'm somebody who goes back to Iraq afterwards and I have a conscience and I take a look at the consequences of this, is it suddenly worth killing tanks? Is there a better way to kill tanks? I'll give the answer. The answer is yes. You want to know why we know? The Russians used to use depleted uranium penetrators. The Soviets did back in the day to kill our tanks. Because again, the best killer tank had a depleted uranium penetrator. But my God, again, we always pick on the Russians. We always do. But sometimes they do amazing things. Like they actually sat down and went, depleted uranium is bad for the environment. And we have a moral obligation not to corrupt the environment. So our new anti-tank program, we're going to get rid of all the old depleted uranium rounds, and we're going to put in new tungsten penetrators. Now, some people will say, well, that's more expensive, and it may not be as effective. And the Russians are like, well, we'll make it effective, and the price is okay, because the price we pay for an additional round, to make this round non-radioactive, is worth it, because the concept that the price we pay for using depleted uranium is huge. They don't want it. The Russians have purged it from their system. They've recognized that using depleted uranium is bad for the environment, bad for health. And now they're irritated because the British are providing depleted uranium to the Ukrainians to use against Russians and on soil that is, of interest to Russia. If not, because it's Mother Russia, depending on where they're fighting, the Donbass, or if it's Ukraine with fellow Slavs. They don't want this poison in their environment. They've made it quite clear that this is an escalation. Now, what's Russia going to do about it? I don't know. They've been in the escalation management business for a long time, which means they're not going to, take a provocation and step it up. And what I mean by that, anybody expecting a Kinzhal missile to impact, Big Ben, it's not going to happen. Not on this issue. But it is a provocation. I mean, they basically made it clear they don't want depleted uranium on, Slavic soil. They don't want that. They don't want this to turn into a miniature Kosovo. They don't want it to turn into a Basra or Fallujah. They don't want that to happen at all. And yet the British have decided they're going to thumb their nose and send it anyways.
Well, we're going to jump over now to Rockfin. Couple of things we want to talk about. One is the Polish ambassador to France recently saying, "Well, if the Ukrainians lose, the mighty Polish army will have to step in and just go through the Russian army like a hot knife through butter." Yeah, and we'll talk about that. And additionally, we're going to talk about what's happening in Avdiivka and in Bakhmut and on the Ukrainian territory and right now regarding the actual military battles. Oh, all right. Thanks a lot, everybody. All 3,763 people that are watching, please make sure you hit the like button. Those of you who can, this is my weekly, we've already done half of it, but this is my weekly Rockfin show. Basically, what I do is I ask everybody, please go to Rockfin, become a member. There is no charge. If they toss me off of YouTube, you can see me on Rockfin. Rockfin does not have there's no censorship, and Rockfin does not have a charge or censorship or anything. So, and no advertisement. So it's a great place to watch. And however, in order for Rockfin to stay on the air, they do have an option where you can become a subscriber. If you can afford it, you don't have to. And for subscribers, I do one subscriber only show per week, and this is it. So if you want to be a subscriber, it is $14.99 a month, or about $12 or so a month if you do set up for a year. So don't forget, become a subscriber if you can afford it. If you can't, that's okay. You'll see everything else but my one weekly show. Additionally, tonight at 8 p.m. at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have Scott's going to be back, and we're going to have Andre Martianov, and we got plenty to talk about. So now we're going to go talk about Poland, saying they're going to step in, and we're going to talk about what's happening on the battlefield. All right, so we're going to start by saying